Every religion claims truth, absolute truth, eternal truth. But when you line those truths up side by side, something strange happens. They contradict each other, they cancel each other out, and sometimes they collapse into pure absurdity. Tonight, we're not mocking faith. We're doing something far more dangerous. We're ranking the most absurd beliefs ever taken seriously by millions of intelligent people. Beliefs defended with fear, protected by tradition, and rarely questioned out loud. Some of these ideas shaped civilizations. Some justified suffering, and some are still taught to children as fact. By the end of this video, one question will linger in your mind. If so many beliefs are this fragile, why did we ever stop questioning? Let's begin. You were born broken. Here's the setup. You arrive in the world. No crimes committed, no choices made, no intent, no history, no awareness. And yet, according to many belief systems, you are already guilty, already flawed, already in need of repair before you have even learned how to speak. This idea teaches that being human is not neutral. It is a defect. That something inside you is twisted by default. You inherit moral corruption the same way you inherit eye color. Not because of what you do, but because of what you are. Existence itself becomes the accusation. Now pause and really think about the conflict here. A perfect creator creates imperfect beings, fully aware of their flaws, and then holds them accountable for those flaws. The design is intentional, the outcome is predictable, and the punishment is still justified. Responsibility flows downward, blame flows upward, and no one questions the logic in between. In this system, the crime is not action. The crime is being born. Salvation is framed as mercy, but it functions more like treatment, a cure for a sickness you never consented to having. You are told you are broken, then offered wholeness under strict conditions. Gratitude is expected for the rescue. Here is where it turns darker. If people are taught they are broken from birth, they will spend their lives seeking permission to feel worthy. They will look outward for approval, forgiveness, and validation. Authority figures become gatekeepers of inner peace. Doubt feels dangerous, because questioning the cure means questioning the diagnosis. Shame becomes the engine. Obedience becomes the relief. Control becomes effortless, because the fear is internalized. No chains are needed when people believe they deserve restraint. No threats are required when guilt runs automatically in the background of the mind. And notice something subtle. This belief does not just shape theology, it shapes identity. When brokenness becomes your starting point, self-trust erodes early. Confidence feels suspicious. Self-acceptance feels rebellious. Independence feels like arrogance. But this idea, as powerful as it is only the beginning. It is not the most extreme belief on the list. Not even close. Number 9. Thoughts can damn you. Imagine being judged, not for what you did, but for what briefly crossed your mind. Not actions, not harm, just a passing thought, a flash of desire, a moment of curiosity that never left your head. In many religious traditions, this is not a minor issue. It is treated as moral failure. The logic goes like this. Thinking the wrong thought is as dangerous as committing the act itself. Wanting becomes sin. Wondering becomes corruption. The inner world is no longer private. It is a courtroom. And every thought is potential evidence. Here is where the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. The human mind is praised as the tool meant to seek truth, meaning, and understanding. And yet, that same mind is punished for wandering too far. Exploration is encouraged only within invisible boundaries. Step outside them, even mentally, and you are already guilty. So what happens over time? People begin to monitor themselves constantly, not just their behavior, but their inner life. Thoughts are intercepted before they fully form. Imagination is filtered. Curiosity is redirected. Shame appears not after harm, but after mere impulse. This is a powerful form of control, because it requires no external force. There is no need for guards, laws, or surveillance. The system installs the guard directly inside your head. You become both prisoner and warden. You discipline yourself automatically. long before anyone else has to. And this has consequences. When you are taught to fear your own thoughts, you stop trusting your mind. You begin to see your inner voice as dangerous, unreliable, even sinful. Reflection feels risky. Honest self-examination feels unsafe. Over time, this creates a split. Outward compliance. Inward anxiety. People learn how to appear pure, while feeling permanently suspect on the inside. Peace becomes conditional on mental silence, not understanding. And once a belief teaches you that your own thoughts can condemn you, the next step is inevitable. Doubt itself becomes the enemy. Number 8. Doubt is evil. Every system that claims absolute certainty eventually treats doubt as a threat. Not because doubt is loud or violent, but because it is subtle. It spreads quietly. It does not attack. It simply asks a question. And that question is the one authority fears most. What if this is not true? Instead of answering that question, many belief systems choose to poison it. Doubt is reframed as weakness, as moral failure, as rebellion disguised as curiosity. You are not told you are wrong. You are told something is wrong with you, your character, your loyalty, your heart. This is how doubt becomes dangerous, not intellectually, but socially. Once doubt is labeled immoral, questioning stops being a search for truth and starts feeling like betrayal. People do not fear being incorrect, they fear being cast out. So silence becomes safer than honesty. Here is the absurdity hiding in plain sight. If a belief is true, it should survive questions. Truth does not need protection from curiosity. It welcomes it. Every major advancement in human knowledge came from someone doubting what everyone else accepted. Science is built on this principle. Progress depends on uncertainty. Without doubt, there is no correction, no growth, no refinement. Yet many religions teach the opposite. They warn that asking honest questions risks punishment, not just social consequences, but eternal ones. Curiosity is no longer neutral. It is framed as a test of loyalty. Ask too much, and you reveal a lack of faith. So people learn to ask only safe questions. Questions with approved answers. Questions that sound brave but change nothing. The appearance of inquiry replaces the substance of it. A truth that collapses under curiosity was never strong to begin with. If belief requires fear to survive, then fear is doing the work, not truth. And fear always demands more control. When doubt is forbidden, belief becomes fragile, rigid, defensive. It cannot bend, because bending risks breaking. Every challenge feels like an attack. Every outsider feels like a threat. The system tightens, not to protect truth, but to protect itself. And once doubt is labeled evil, something else happens. Obedience becomes virtue. Certainty becomes identity. And disagreement becomes dangerous. Which is exactly what comes next. Number 7. Eternal punishment for temporary mistakes. Finite actions, infinite punishment. That is the core of this belief, and the imbalance should stop you cold. A few decades of imperfect decisions, made under pressure, ignorance, fear, and limited information, are met with endless suffering. Not correction, not rehabilitation, just eternity. Pause on that word for a moment. Eternity. No expiration, no proportionality, no mercy clause written into the system, just endless consequence for temporary mistakes. Even the harshest human justice systems recognize limits. Sentences end. Appeals exist. Context matters. Yet some religious models present infinite torment not as cruelty, but as moral necessity. Here is the contradiction, hiding in plain sight. A loving and all-knowing being creates flawed creatures, fully aware of their weaknesses, tendencies, and limitations. These flaws are not accidents. They are built in, and then those same flaws become the justification for eternal punishment, not for what the beings were capable of understanding, but for failing to rise above a design they never chose. Think about the scale of that logic. Finite understanding measured against infinite consequence. A moment of doubt weighed against endless suffering. A lifetime of confusion, judged by a standard that assumes perfect clarity. The punishment does not fit the crime, because the crime is being human. This belief did not just shape theology, it shaped behavior. Fear became the motivator, not wisdom, not compassion. Fear kept people obedient when reason failed. Fear silenced dissent before questions could fully form. Fear made curiosity feel dangerous and disagreement feel fatal. When eternal punishment is placed on the table, discussion stops being honest. No one debates freely when the cost of being wrong is infinite. People comply outwardly and suppress inwardly. Belief becomes a survival strategy, not a conclusion. And fear, once installed, rarely leaves quietly. It lingers long after belief weakens. It appears as anxiety, as guilt, as a constant sense that one mistake could ruin everything. Even when people leave the doctrine behind, the emotional residue often remains. This is the power of infinite punishment. It does not need to be carried out to be effective. It only needs to be believed. But as disturbing as this idea is, absurdity does not peak here. It escalates. Number 6. Sacred rules that expire when convenient. Many religions claim their laws are eternal, unchanging truths handed down from an all-knowing source. Rules meant to stand outside of time, culture, and human opinion. They are presented as fixed anchors in a shifting world. Until society changes. Then something interesting happens. Rules once defended as divine commands are quietly softened. What was once literal becomes metaphorical. What was once clear becomes contextual. Practices that no longer fit modern values slowly fade from emphasis, and outdated beliefs disappear without ceremony. Ask yourself an honest question. If a rule truly comes from an all-knowing source, why does it age so poorly? Why does it require constant reinterpretation to remain acceptable? Why do moral standards seem to improve only after humans push back against them? Look at the pattern closely. Human values evolve first. Empathy expands. Knowledge grows. Social awareness deepens. Only then does doctrine adjust, often reluctantly, often after resistance, often after harm has already been done. The change never starts at the altar. It starts in the streets, in science, in lived experience. This creates an uncomfortable tension. Religious morality is presented as the source of ethics, yet it repeatedly trails behind ethical progress. Ideas once defended as sacred are later rejected as misunderstandings. The problem is never the rule itself, only our interpretation of it. Conveniently, interpretation always changes after the damage becomes undeniable, which raises an unsettling possibility. Maybe morality did not originate in religion at all. Maybe it emerged from human experience, empathy, and reason. Maybe religion adopted those values, wrapped them in sacred language, and then claimed authorship. And when those values change, the packaging changes too. The message stays flexible enough to survive. The authority remains intact. The receipt is quietly revised, but the claim of divine origin remains unquestioned. This belief survives because it offers certainty without accountability. The rules are perfect, even when they are wrong. The source is flawless, even when the outcome is not. And once you notice this pattern, it becomes hard to unsee. Which brings us to something even stranger. Number 5. Special people with direct access to truth. Throughout history, certain individuals have claimed exclusive access to ultimate truth. They present themselves as prophets, messengers, or chosen intermediaries between humanity and something divine. Their role is clear. They receive the message. Everyone else is expected to listen, accept, and obey. Verification is not part of the arrangement. The absurdity here is not believing that someone had a vision. Humans have visions all the time. Dreams, revelations, altered states, powerful emotional experiences. These are universal human phenomena. Every culture, every era, every psychological framework recognizes them. The absurdity begins when a private, unverifiable experience is transformed into a universal obligation. One person's inner moment becomes everyone else's moral responsibility. A personal revelation turns into a permanent rulebook for millions of lives. Think about how fragile that foundation really is. If one person hears a voice, it is called revelation. If another hears a voice under different circumstances, It is called a disorder. Same experience. Different labels. The distinction is not based on evidence, but on timing, cultural acceptance, and how many people choose to believe the story. Once enough followers gather, the claim becomes protected. Questioning it feels disrespectful. Investigating it feels hostile. Over time, the original experience becomes untouchable, sealed behind layers of tradition and reverence. This is where power enters quietly. When authority is tied to invisible claims, it cannot be challenged using normal standards. There is nothing to test, nothing to reproduce, nothing to verify. The claim exists outside evidence, which places it beyond accountability. Those who speak on behalf of the divine inherit that protection. Their words carry weight not because of reason or results, but because of supposed access to something no one else can see. Disagreement is reframed as rebellion. Skepticism becomes arrogance. Doubt becomes disrespect. And once power is anchored to the invisible, it becomes nearly impossible to confront. Authority hardens. Hierarchies form. Control follows naturally. This belief does more than elevate certain individuals. It silences everyone else. And that sets the stage for the next belief. Number 4. Faith is virtue, evidence is suspicion. In most areas of life, belief without evidence is treated as a warning sign. If someone asks you to trust a stranger with your money, your safety, or your future, you demand proof. You ask questions. You look for patterns. You verify. That is not cynicism. That is survival. But in religion, the rules often flip. Belief without evidence is praised. Faith becomes a moral achievement. Doubt becomes failure. The less you know, the more virtuous you are considered. The more you ask, the more suspicious you become. Now think carefully about what that creates. If believing without evidence is a virtue, then any belief can claim moral high ground. Not just one religion. All of them. Contradictory ideas. Mutually exclusive truths. Completely different gods, afterlives, moral laws, and cosmic histories. All protected by the same shield. Faith becomes a universal excuse. It is not a method for discovering truth. It is a method for defending what you already believe, even when reality pushes back. It allows a person to say, I do not need to show you why I am right. I just need to believe harder. And that is why this belief is so powerful. It does not ask you to understand. It asks you to surrender. It rewards certainty over curiosity, loyalty over investigation, comfort over clarity. Once surrender becomes the standard, evidence starts to look like an attack. Questions begin to feel disrespectful. Critical thinking becomes a temptation rather than a tool. People learn to treat reason like a rival, not an ally. This belief also creates an emotional trap. If faith is virtue, then evidence can feel like danger. Because evidence forces decisions. Evidence requires honesty. Evidence demands that you adjust when you are wrong. Faith lets you stay the same and still feel righteous. So the system becomes self-sealing. The less proof there is, the more faith is required. The more faith is required, the more questioning is condemned. It is a loop that keeps itself alive. And once surrender is normalized, almost anything can follow, even something as extreme as the next belief. Including this. Number 3. Moral superiority, by belief alone. This belief sounds subtle, but it reshapes everything beneath it. The idea is simple. Believing the right thing makes you a better person, not kinder, not wiser, not more compassionate, just morally superior by default. In this framework, ethics are no longer measured by actions. They are measured by alignment. If you hold the correct belief, you are elevated. If you do not, your character is automatically suspect. Goodness stops being something you do and becomes something you claim. Here is where the conflict begins. Two people can act in the same way, show the same kindness, commit the same harm, yet one is seen as righteous and the other as lost, simply because of belief. The moral score is decided before behavior even enters the conversation. This belief is comforting, which is why it spreads so easily. It removes the burden of self-examination. You do not have to ask, am I acting justly, if you already believe you are on the right side of truth. Belief becomes a shortcut to virtue. Over time, this creates a hierarchy, not based on empathy or integrity, but on ideological membership. Insiders are good by definition. Outsiders are flawed by default. Their arguments are dismissed. Their experiences are discounted. Their suffering is often minimized, because moral worth has already been assigned. Notice how dangerous that is. Once belief defines goodness, disagreement feels like immorality. Criticism feels like attack. Listening feels unnecessary. Why learn from someone who is already wrong at the core? This is how compassion erodes quietly. People stop asking what is right and start asking who is right. Moral reasoning is replaced with moral labeling. Complex human behavior is reduced to categories of saved and unsaved, pure and impure, enlightened and blind. And the most disturbing part is how invisible this process feels from the inside. Those who benefit from moral superiority rarely notice it. It feels like confidence, like certainty, like standing on solid ground. But to everyone outside, it feels like judgment without understanding. Once belief alone grants moral authority, accountability weakens. Actions are excused. Harm is justified. Intent matters less than loyalty. The group protects itself, not because it is right, but because it must remain righteous. And when moral worth is assigned before empathy, something even more dangerous becomes possible. Which leads us directly to the next belief. Number 2. Obedience over compassion. Once belief determines moral superiority, the next step follows almost automatically. Obedience becomes more important than compassion. Loyalty outweighs empathy. Doing what you are told matters more than responding to what is right in front of you. In this belief system, goodness is measured by compliance. Following the rule is praised, even when the rule causes harm. Questioning the command is treated as moral failure, not moral courage. The highest virtue is submission. Here is the conflict. Compassion requires judgment. It asks you to see the individual, not just the rule. Obedience asks you to stop seeing and start executing. One demands awareness. The other demands silence. This is how ordinary people are turned into instruments. Harm is no longer a personal choice. It becomes a duty. Responsibility is outsourced upward, toward doctrine, authority, or divine will. If the outcome is cruel, the believer is taught to blame the rule, not themselves. Or worse, to praise the cruelty as necessary. History is full of examples of this pattern. Acts that would feel wrong on a human level are reframed as righteous because they were commanded. Suffering is justified as part of a larger plan. Victims become lessons. Pain becomes proof of faith. Notice what gets lost here. Moral intuition. The quiet voice that says this feels wrong. Obedience teaches people to distrust that voice, to override it, to replace it with permission from above. And once compassion is replaced by compliance, almost anything can be done without guilt. The individual no longer asks, "Should I do this?" They ask, "Was I told to do this?" That shift changes everything. This belief also creates a dangerous loophole. If obedience is virtue, then cruelty can be virtuous too, as long as it is authorized. Empathy becomes optional. Context becomes irrelevant. Humanity becomes secondary. Perhaps the most chilling part is how peaceful this can feel from the inside. Obedience offers relief, no ambiguity, no responsibility, no moral burden. Just follow, and you are safe. But when obedience is elevated above compassion, morality stops being human. It becomes mechanical, detached, capable of immense harm without anyone feeling personally responsible. And once a system reaches this point, only one belief remains to justify it all. Rank number 1. Number 1. Our belief is true, all others are false. Here it is, the foundation beneath every other absurdity. The belief that explains why contradictions are ignored, why doubt is feared, and why obedience is rewarded. The belief that quietly holds everything together. Thousands of religions exist, thousands of truth claims, thousands of holy texts, each declaring a different origin story, a different moral code, a different path to salvation. And yet, nearly everyone believes they were born into the correct one. The confidence is striking. The certainty sounds identical across cultures. The only thing that changes is geography. A child raised in one country grows up absolutely convinced of one truth. A child raised elsewhere is just as convinced of a completely different one. Same conviction, same emotional certainty, entirely different conclusions. Statistically, this should feel suspicious. If truth were truly singular and obvious, we would expect convergence. Instead, we see distribution. Belief maps almost perfectly onto birthplace, family, and culture. But instead of raising questions, this pattern feels normal, comfortable, invisible from the inside. This belief asks you to accept something extraordinary without noticing how arbitrary it is. That truth is exclusive, but access to it is randomly assigned at birth. That billions of people are wrong, misguided, or lost, but somehow you were born on the correct side of the cosmic line. This idea has fueled wars, justified oppression, and fractured humanity into competing moral camps. It has convinced generations that disagreement is not just error, but rebellion. Not just ignorance, but evil. When truth becomes exclusive, coexistence becomes conditional. And yet, no one chooses their first belief. No one compares all religions as a child and selects the most convincing one. Belief is inherited long before it is examined. It is absorbed through language, ritual, fear, and trust in authority. Once you see that, something unsettling happens. The certainty begins to loosen. The confidence starts to look borrowed. The belief feels less like a discovery and more like an accident of birth, which leads to a final, quiet realization. If belief is inherited, not chosen, then certainty may not be proof of truth at all. It may simply be proof of exposure. And once that realization settles in, the entire structure starts to tremble. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Absurd beliefs don't survive because people are stupid. They survive because questioning is discouraged, fear is rewarded, and tradition feels safer than uncertainty. Religion didn't spread through evidence. It spread through identity, repetition, and authority. And once belief becomes part of who you are, letting go feels like losing yourself. But questioning isn't betrayal, it's responsibility. Progress didn't come from obedience. It came from curiosity. The moment humans asked, "What if this isn't true?" So maybe the most dangerous belief of all isn't any single doctrine. It's the idea that you're done thinking. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. That's where growth begins. If you value truth over tradition, stay curious. And if you're not afraid to question what you were taught, subscribe.